For the Rich podcast, today we have a guest who embodies courage, integrity, and a relentless pursuit of truth. Joining us is John Kiriakou, a former CIA officer who became widely known as a whistleblower after exposing the CIA's use of waterboarding as an interrogation technique. His actions led to significant personal and professional consequences, but they also sparked an important conversation about ethics, transparency, and the human rights in intelligence work. John has since become an outspoken advocate for justice, author, and public speaker. We're honored to have him share his journey with us today and delve into the experiences that have shaped his views on power, ethics, and the future of intelligence. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
John, your upbringing and early influences. Many people are shaped by the values instilled in them during their upbringing. How did your childhood and family environment influence your views on authority and justice? Were there any moments in your early life that set you on a path to the CIA?
That's a good question, actually. It's not a question I normally get. Yeah, my childhood, my upbringing probably had more of an influence on my personal philosophy on things like human rights and civil rights and civil liberties than anything else did. There were a handful of people who were instrumental, really, in helping me to build my character. My father, of course, like everybody's father pretty much. My grandfather, with whom I was very, very close, and I'll get into that in a second. But two other people a little bit later in life. As a teenager, Pete Seeger, the folk singer, and I'm very proud to say that Pete became a friend of mine. Not a close friend, but close enough that he had a major impact on my life. And Daniel Ellsberg, who gave us the Pentagon Papers way back in 1970. Dan became a mentor and an ethical guide when I needed one the most. My grandfather, I said a second ago, my grandfather and I were very close. My grandfather was an immigrant. All four of my grandparents emigrated from Greece, from the island of Rhodes. But I was closest with my dad's father. And he was a working man. He worked in a steel mill for 40 years, and then after retirement went to work in his sister-in-law's butcher shop as a butcher. But even though he was a simple man who had trouble reading and writing, didn't speak very much English, handful of words, he had an incredible life story. This is a guy that came here alone at the age of 20. Back then, the ship took almost a month to make its way here. Came with nothing, and then he would, we would talk about when you're a little kid, you don't know what's important. So I would ask him if when he first arrived, did they have Model T Fords? Did he ever see a Model T Ford? I remember asking him that question. And he would say, yeah, they had Model T Fords. I remember they used to drive up and down the street, right? And then he'd say, but you know what else I did? I went to a Sacco and Vanzetti rally, and I almost lost my job. Well, that meant nothing to a 6-year-old, but it meant an incredible amount to a 16-year-old once I figured out who Sacco and Vanzetti were.
Yeah.
Once I figured out that my grandfather was one of the founders of the American Hellenic Educational and Progressive Association, AHEPA, which was initially set up as a militia to protect Jews and black people who were being lynched in the South.
Wow.
I still have his fez that he used to wear at the secret meetings. Yeah, so little things that I learned as life went on, where my grandfather was always on the right side of history. And this guy never had two nickels to rub together. When he died and we sold his house, we got $1,800 for his house. $1,800. It's in a slum. But that was never important to him. What was important was ethics and doing the right thing. And because he had no education, he made sure, by God, his children had an education.
So in what way would you say that they foreshadowed your eventual disillusionment with everything?
There were a couple of times. I'll tell you a story I never told anybody. I haven't even thought about this in years. My dad had a first cousin, Angelo Atsiknouthis. And Angelo was a member of the Greek Merchant Marine. And in I'm going to say this was like 1967 or 68. They were in port in Norfolk, Virginia. And the captain said, Angelo, I want you to march guard duty tonight because I don't trust any of these other guys. I think they're going to jump ship. And as soon as the sun went down, Angelo went right over the side of the ship. Right? And he swam to shore, and somehow he made his way to Richmond, Virginia. And in Richmond, he found a Greek coffee shop. There were many, many Greek coffee shops at the time, all up and down the East Coast. And he said he just jumped ship, which was actually, not uncommon. And he had an uncle in Farrell, Pennsylvania. Everybody pulled their money and they got him enough for whatever it was, a bus ticket or a train ticket, I don't know, to Farrell, Pennsylvania. Okay, the reason I tell you that story is I remember, like I say, I was 3 or 4. I remember immigration coming to my grandfather's house and banging on the door, and Angelo hiding in the broom closet in the kitchen. And my grandfather, with his 3rd grade education and his lack of English, knew enough to say, warrant. Warrant? Come in. Yeah. And he saved Angelo. And you know what Angelo ended up doing? He ended up waiting things out until there was an amnesty. He got his American citizenship, and then he ran the barber shop in the Pentagon for 25 years. So, when the cops are banging on the door and your grandfather tells them to, get the fuck out of here, that makes an impact.
How's that for a metaphor for, going against the people who can help you the most eventually as well?
Right? Isn't that the truth?
Wow, dude. That is eye-opening.
He was a giant in my life. He really was. And it's funny, too. I have his driver's license. And in my memory, my grandfather was, 6'6", 250 of just knotted muscle. And he did have knotted muscle from 40 years as a slab cutter at U.S. Steel. But he was 5'8", it says on his driver's license. And it's like, what? 5'8"?
Wow. Are you like, I don't remember him like that?
I definitely do not remember him 5'8".
That is funny. Coming on to like human nature and patterns, you had an intriguing vantage point on human nature. So having been both an intelligence officer and a whistleblower, what patterns have you observed in how people empower rationalize unethical behavior? And how do you see these patterns? And are they inherent to human nature? Are they a product of the environments?
Well, that's also a good question. Forgive me if my answer is a little bit lengthy.
Go crazy. Go crazy.
When I was first hired at the CIA, I was in the Directorate of Intelligence, which is the analytic arm of the CIA. And I was specifically assigned to an office called the Office of Leadership Analysis. It was a psychology office where we did long-distance psychological evaluations of foreign leaders, right? That office no longer exists, but it was a very, very fun job. And it was a contemporary office of what was then called the Political Psychology Division, made up of psychiatrists, psychologists, a couple of anthropologists, a sociologist or two. So I worked very, very closely with those people. And they taught me a lot. One of the things that they taught me is that the CIA actively seeks to hire people who have sociopathic tendencies. They don't actively seek to hire sociopaths, because sociopaths have no conscience, and people with no conscience are impossible to control. And they also blow right through a polygraph because they're unable to feel guilt. Their brains won't allow them to feel guilt. So they could just as soon cut your throat from ear to ear and then, go have lunch and finish out their workday. You don't want people like that. You want people who have sociopathic tendencies. So I asked, well, what does that mean? And the shrink I was talking to said, well, you have sociopathic tendencies. And I said, I'm offended by that. I'm offended that you would say something like that. And he said, no, think about it. People with sociopathic tendencies have consciences. They feel guilt or remorse, but they are willing to break the law or to work in moral, ethical, and even legal gray areas if they believe it's in the service of good. And, after he told me that, I remembered an exercise that they gave us in the hiring process. So I was with a group of other people who had applied for these jobs, whether they were in intelligence or operations. And the instructor said, let's say that you're posted overseas in some foreign country, and you get a cable from headquarters telling you that headquarters really, really needs information on, the next Indonesian economic figures, let's say. So you begin to cultivate the Indonesian second secretary for economic affairs. And you become friends, you take him to lunch, your wives become friends, you go to dinner together. Headquarters gives you, virtually an unlimited budget. So you go on vacation together, you buy him gifts, but you come to the determination that he is not recruitable. But headquarters needs those numbers. So what do you do? And this woman raised her hand and she said, well, maybe you can work it through the wife. Maybe, the wife can influence him. And then some guy raises his hand and says, well, you just double down and you work on him for another 6 months or another 12 months. And I'm looking around, like looking at these people. And then I put my hand up and the instructor says, yeah. And I said, you break into the embassy and you steal it. He said, that's exactly what you do. Okay, well, I came to learn. A normal person won't break into a foreign embassy and steal a document. I would, but it's because I have sociopathic tendencies.
So is the thought itself the idea? Is that giveaway? It doesn't imply that you would do it, is what I'm trying to get at. But just having the thought in itself was a giveaway.
Yeah, having the thought is a giveaway. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Mind blowing right now.
Yeah. So, another thing that I learned, and this is not specific to the CIA, it's applicable to the Fortune 500, to elected office. You have to be a sociopath and probably a narcissist if you want to make it to the very top. Because just like in the corporate world, you make it to the top by climbing on the backs of the people around you. You have to be perfectly willing to stab somebody right in the back. And if you have to, spin them around and stab him in the front to get ahead. And that's never been me.
We're talking about I want your position and I'll do anything to get it.
Or you're going for a promotion and the guy next to you is going for a promotion. And so, you're wondering, you're wondering, well, what did he, I wonder what he said on his application. So you go in on Sunday, you hack into his computer, you make a copy of his application, and you be sure that you prepare to defeat every point that he made on that application.
Mm-hmm. Is this something personally witnessed?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Most definitely. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. That's a lot. That's really good insight. But
you can trust no one.
This kind of ties into the next question. Is there a point where the pursuit of power or national security overrides basic human ethics? Like, how did witnessing or participating in these moments affect your view on humanity?
Yeah.
Have they evolved?
Oh, yeah. I used to think just blindly, we're the good guys, right? We're the good guys. And so if this is what the White House wants us to do, we should do it. If this is what the CIA director wants us to do, we should do it. And I came to realize that we're not the good guys. Sometimes we are, sure. And sometimes we are murderers and torturers. There's a wonderful quote by Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the first post-monarchical president of Egypt. This is a wonderful quote. He said, "The thing about you Americans is that you never make clear-cut stupid decisions. You only make very complicated stupid decisions, which makes us wonder if there is something to them which we are missing." And man, I saw that with my own two eyes 1,000 times over the course of my career. So never did I ever hear somebody in a position of authority ask, what's the moral thing to do? What's the ethical thing to do? Or even what's the legal thing to do? Even if it's illegal, you just get a presidential waiver and you can go do whatever you want.
So are they operating as a for-profit company, essentially?
I mean, that's really what it comes down to, isn't it?
That's hilarious. You faced incredible pressure and made decisions that most people never will. So, how has psychological impact of your work and your decisions to become a whistleblower changed you as a person? Like, what has it taught you about your limits, resilience?
Well, I was just telling a friend of mine last night that when I was growing up, I was the kid who probably would have backed down in the face of the bully, right? Until I was bullied. And one of the greatest compliments any of my CIA colleagues ever gave me was one of them said, "You know what I like about you? You're not afraid of anybody." And I said, I've never really thought about that. But no, I'm not. I'm not afraid of anybody. And that's why I volunteered to go to Afghanistan. I volunteered to go back to Pakistan. And when I saw, waste, fraud, abuse, and illegality at the CIA, I went to the media and blew the whistle. Yeah. I mean, somebody's got to stand up. Somebody's got to say this is wrong. Somebody's got to remind the powers that be in Washington that we're supposed to be a nation of laws. I never set out to be that person. I never intended or even wanted. The price has been incredibly high. But somebody had to do it. Somebody had to say something.
So, coming full, how did that change you, though, and psychologically?
Well, in a number of ways. I will admit to you that I am probably angrier than I ever was in earlier years. I had the personal fallout was such that I trust literally nobody. Literally nobody. Where I got burned was the CIA trains you to not trust anybody. But then, there's that one person in your life, that one person you always know, well, if it hits the fan, at least I've got this one person. And then it turns out, no, you don't. No, you're on your own. So those were the two biggest changes in my life. I will say, too, that I've adopted as personal issues that had never occurred to me 20 years ago, right? I never thought about sentencing reform, prison reform, or shutting down Guantanamo, or, human rights or whatever. They just never really entered my mind. And now they're all I think about and have been for the last, decade and a half.
Most positive way you would say you're channeling that anger, though?
Oh, I'm proud to say that I'm told that I'm somewhat influential. I write a lot. I have a radio show every day. I have a TV show every week. People
Shout
watch
out to
it.
the Misfits, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. And it's mostly my writing that that has an impact, because once you write something, it's out there, and it's out there permanently. And I write a lot about corruption in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I write a lot about human rights in prisons. I mean, everything from medical care to animal grade food, to overcrowding and physical plant. We should be ashamed of ourselves. We should be ashamed of the way we treat human beings in the prison system at every level. I mean, the federal prisons, the state prisons, and the local jails. We should be ashamed, and we're not. We're not.
Kind of off topic here a little bit, but I used to watch RT 2016 when I discovered Tom Hartman. I don't know if he was necessary. Was he on RT?
Yeah. They carried his show, but I think it was independently produced.
Got you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was just kind of my first insight into that, and it kind of blew my mind. I was like, wait, Russian sponsored? Like, are there any other countries that sponsor television in the USA? And
yes.
On top of that, like, just what is your perspective on that? Like, I really admired the conversation you had with Bustamante. Like I had never considered the viewpoint of, yo, you're still going against and you're helping the, that narrative, because I don't see it like that.
I don't either. And I'll tell you something funny. About, let me think, 5 years ago, I did a show on Sputnik called Loud and Clear. And it was with a co-host, Brian Becker, who's an awesome guy. And every Thursday, we would dedicate 30 minutes to something that we called Criminal Injustice. It was a weekly segment. And we would always have independent journalist Kevin Gastala and Paul Wright, who's the founder of the Human Rights Defense Center. And he's the publisher of Prison Legal News magazine. So he's a big prisoner rights guy. So every week we would talk about, the things that I just said: prison reform, sentencing reform, conditions, medical care, food, for-profit prisons. Well, one Thursday, the Washington Post was listening to the show, and they wrote an article a couple of days later, excuse me, saying that by talking about these issues, we were weakening our democracy. That's what they accused me of. I was weakening our democracy. And I said later, no, the crooked judge who took bribes to send juveniles to a for-profit prison so he could line his pockets and build a beach house, he's weakening our democracy. Or when a prisoner's having a mental breakdown, and then to punish him for ruining their evening, 4 guards take him into the shower, put the water on hot, and scald him to the point that all of his skin falls off and he dies 4 hours later. That is weakening our democracy. So I don't want to hear it from the Washington Post.
Wow. Any final thoughts on RT, though?
Sure. I had been on RT many, many times when they were finally shut down. And I'll say the same thing about RT that I have said about Sputnik. Nobody has ever asked me to say something or to not say something to fit into some sort of ideology, ever. In fact, when Sputnik first approached me about giving me a show, I said no. And then 6 or 8 months later, they came back and they offered a show again. And I said, well, kind of, always have wanted to get into radio, but if I were to take a show with you guys, I would want to have the freedom to say anything I want about anyone I want and to criticize anyone I want, including Vladimir Putin. And the general manager said, done. And I said, yeah. I said, put that in writing in the contract? And he said, okay. And he did. And listen, I don't know very much about Russia. I'm a career Middle East guy, so it's not really my area of expertise. But on the day that the Russians invaded Ukraine, I opened my show by saying I unreservedly condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I understand why they did it, but I'm opposed to it, and I urge them to withdraw immediately, because if we're going to be peace activists or supporters of peace, then we need to be supporters of peace, whether it's to criticize the Russians or the Americans or the Israelis or anybody else.
Quite the conundrum, though. I can see how that makes you look. Weird position to put you in, right?
It is. Uh-huh.
Oh, man.
It is.
Like, by the way, I don't know what this is all about. Don't loop me into this. Do you ever find yourself reflecting on whether your time in the CIA fundamentally changed who you are, perhaps in ways you didn't realize until after you left? If so, are these changes once you've come to accept? Like, do they remain points of internal conflict?
Well, the honest answer is I'm not sure. When I was in prison, I wrote a book called Doing Time Like a Spy: How the CIA Taught Me to Survive and Thrive in Prison. And when I sat down to start writing it, I wrote it as a joke, right? And I open it by taking these 20 life lessons that the CIA taught me, and I illustrate how I adapted those life lessons to prison life. By the time I got done with the book, it was actually quite a serious book. There are light parts of it, but it was quite a serious book. And I think, in answer to your question, that that the CIA did not change me. It heightened, it honed those aspects of my personality that became more important later. Like, for example, you have to have a healthy distrust of authority. I always have. I don't like cops. I've never liked cops. And I never had any problem with cops. I just don't like them. We always used to say when we were kids, oh, you give a guy a stick and a badge and you've created a monster. Well, you know what? That's true in many cases. And so I ended up sharpening that position in my mind to the point where, when I told people, listen, I'm thinking of going public on this torture thing. This is just wrong, wrong, wrong. And they're like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Just keep your mouth shut. Just let it go. Somebody else will do it. Well, I waited for 5 years. Nobody else did it. So I did it. So I think, no, it didn't really change me so much as it helped me to mature in my worldview in a way that was opposite of what the CIA probably expected.
It's funny because I relate to you in the concept of urban development, where the pushback and then a lot of waiting and things like that. So just in that aspect, yeah, definitely. Given the nature of your work, how do you feel like your time in the CIA required you to suppress or alter parts of your identity? And now that you've distanced yourself from the agency, do you find that those aspects of your personality have resurfaced, or are there parts that you are, forever changed or lost?
I remember on the day that I resigned, my wife said, well, now you never have to hide your politics again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a good point.
Yeah. It was the first thing she said. As soon as I signed the paperwork, right, to take a job in the private sector, that was the first thing that she said.
That's interesting. It makes me wonder about celebrities.
Yeah, definitely. I remember, the CIA is supposed to be completely apolitical. And for a long time it was. I literally had no idea the political leanings of the people that I worked with. In fact, I remember there were two things that stick in my mind from the 1990s. One was on Election Day 1992. Every branch in the CIA has a morning meeting, so you discuss whatever happened overnight. You talk about what you're writing today, what you're going to write tomorrow, that kind of thing. And my boss said, listen, I know we're not supposed to do this, but I'm really curious as to who everybody voted for this morning. And that's a no-no. You're not supposed to even, speak those words out loud. But people said, and I remember being shocked that it was 3 for Bush, 3 for Clinton, and 2 for Perot. And I remember thinking, I can't believe I'm not the only lefty in this branch. Like, I couldn't believe it. And then in 1996, there was a woman in my office who was reprimanded because she had a Dole for President bumper sticker hanging in her cubicle. They reprimanded her. No politics. And so,
Not even
as soon as
a go vote sticker?
nothing. And so once I got out, I could march in demonstrations, which I did all the time, and I still do all the time. I could go to meetings. I could, do whatever I wanted.
That is funny though, where you're like, I couldn't wait to march. All this time I've been serving.
In fact, I remember going to a Veterans for Peace march, and the chapter president, he was a retired lieutenant colonel, and he says, how come I've never heard of you? And I said, I was in the CIA for 15 years. He's like, oh, enough said. Yeah.
That's hilarious. We're going to move on to a little controversial, a little contentious topics, but this is just to challenge perspectives here and encourage deeper reflection. Some might argue that your actions, while morally driven, endangered national security. How do you respond to the contention that the moral high ground you took may have been compromised the safety of your fellow citizens? Does this critique even ever weigh on you, or do you see it as a necessary risk for the greater good?
Oh, yeah, it doesn't weigh on me for one instant. And I'll tell you why. Studies were actually done. I'll give you two answers. Studies were actually done about this that concluded that it was the torture program that actually made it more dangerous for Americans, in that it was the torture program that that had leaked out well before I ever said anything about waterboarding, that served as a recruiting tool for Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups. Yeah. Back in, I blew the whistle in December of 2007. In 2005, Human Rights Watch published a report saying the CIA is torturing its prisoners. In 2006, Amnesty International said the same thing. And in 2007, the International Committee of the Red Cross issued their report. And then also in whatever it was, 6 or 7, there was a leak to the New York Times about the secret prison system. So no, the revelations didn't endanger American lives or endanger national security. The programs endangered American lives and national security. You know, Tom Drake, the NSA whistleblower, dear friend of mine, Tom was the one who blew the whistle on warrantless wiretapping of American citizens. And when he was charged with 9 felonies, including 7 counts of espionage, and he never went public. He went to the congressional oversight committees. He was told that he had the blood of American soldiers on his hands. And he was on the stand, and he said, name one. Name one American soldier whose blood is on my hands. Name one. I defy you. And the judge ended up throwing out all the charges. Yes, this is something that the Justice Department does all the time. Another word that they love is grave. This was a grave crime. No, it wasn't. You know, they said this about Roger, what's his name? Roger Stone. He committed a grave crime. No, lying to the FBI is a crime. It's not a grave crime. You know, blowing up the World Trade Center is a grave crime. Or the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. That's a grave crime.
Storming the Capitol is a grave crime.
Storming the Capitol, it's a grave crime. You're making a coup. Telling the FBI a lie? No, sorry. That's not a grave crime.
That is a good point. How deeply entrenched do you anticipate the entertainment industry is tied into prisons?
Into prisons or into the CIA?
Well, you can say both, honestly, because is there an incentive to keep the prisons full in that aspect and propagate horrible, music?
Interesting. Yeah. Well, the prison system is very much a for-profit enterprise. And so how do you make a profit with a prison? You do it by spending as little as you can on food and on medical care, right? You cut it to the bone, and then you start shaving the bone on top of it. I'll tell you something that I've said on several podcasts. My very first full day in prison was a Thursday. I'm sorry, I arrived on Thursday. My very first day was a Friday. And I saw on the menu that they post in the housing units, Friday's fish day. And I said to this Italian from across the hall, fish day. All right, I like fish. And he's like, oh, no. Don't eat this fish. We call it sewer trout. And I said, yeah? He said, yeah, you don't want to eat this fish. It'll make you sick. So we go down to the cafeteria, and they had these boxes stacked up, like 6 boxes. And they all said the same thing. It said, Alaskan cod, product of China, feed use only, not for human consumption. And they're just slopping it on each tray. So I never touched it. But that's one of the ways that they save money. Another way that they save money is they just won't give you any medication. I can't tell you, in the 23 short months that I was in prison, I can't tell you how many people I saw die because they were untreated. There was one Italian. I was very close to the Italians when I was there. I mean, Italians like named Bonanno and Gambino and Lucchesi. So
I remember
one of the Italians.
You ate well, if I'm not mistaken.
I ate very well.
I remember this.
Yeah, very well. So one of them, I worked in the chapel, and one of them lived right across the hall from the chapel. And I saw him one day, and he was in just excruciating pain. And I said, hey, man, what's wrong? He said, I don't know, man. My back is killing me. And I said, you should go to the medical unit. He said, I did. They only gave me Tylenol. I said, that's what they always do. They give everybody Tylenol. So a couple of weeks passed, and I saw him. He's walking with a cane. And I said, is your back still bothering you that much? He's like, man, I can't even get out of bed. I don't know what I would do without this cane. And I thought, wow, that's rough. Another couple of weeks passed, and I see him, and he's in a wheelchair. So I said, I'm going to talk to the chaplain. He said, they won't help me at all in medical. I went to talk to the chaplain. I said, chaplain, there's a serious problem over here. He's an old man. His pain is it's so terrible that it's debilitating, and they won't help him in medical. So the chaplain, because he was the only decent guy in the whole place, he went to the warden and said, you gotta take this guy for an exam. Turned out he had stage 4 spinal cancer. He was a dead man walking. And because every time he went to medical, they would only give him Tylenol, the cancer had just spread like wildfire all through his body. So the warden went to see him in his cell one night and said that if he signed a release promising that he wouldn't sue the Bureau of Prisons, they would give him compassionate release and let him die at home. And he said, no, I'm already dead. And then he died just a week or two later in his bunk, alone. Mm-hmm.
What does that say? Is that like, why am I going to put this burden on the people outside that I know and the whoever I do know left?
You know what he wanted to do? He wanted his family to have the ability to sue the Bureau of Prisons so that his daughter could go to college. That's what he told me. He's like, what? I'm going to die here? I'm going to die there. I'm going to die in a couple of weeks anyway. What's the difference?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's terrible.
That is eye-opening. Super eye-opening. Given your stance against torture and the actions you took, how do you feel about the fact that many of the practices you exposed have been justified or even continued under the guise of national security? And do you believe these justifications are genuine, or are they merely convenient excuses to maintain power? I'm sure you feel strongly.
Most of the so-called enhanced interrogation techniques that I talked about have been banned. All of the most serious ones have been banned. What the Obama administration ended up doing, and they did this thanks to the McCain-Feinstein Amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, was to allow the use only of the techniques that have already been approved and are laid out in the Army Field Manual. Now, there's a danger there. The danger is that the Army Field Manual is an executive branch document. It's not made by an act of Congress. And so if you get a pro-torture president who wants to bring back the torture program and to do it legally, all he has to do is change the Army Field Manual. It's as simple as that. It's a simple executive order, and there's nothing to stop him. So it's disappointing to me that we haven't written the changes in stone, but I am happy that at least, these terrible techniques have been stopped.
It does frustrate me about how many things are taken away, and then now we got to fight for them to come back and then be like, it's progress.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking at the broader intelligence community, do you think there's a danger in how we romanticize or villainize figures like yourself? Does the public's perception align with the reality of what it means to work in intelligence? Or does it obscure the true ethical dilemmas faced by those in the field?
Right. Well, we have a Whistleblower Protection Act, Federal Whistleblower Protection Act in the United States, but national security whistleblowers are exempted from its protections. Yeah. So if you work for the Department of Labor or the Department of Agriculture, God bless. Go ahead, blow the whistle to your heart's content. If you work for CIA, FBI, NSA, DOD, you're probably going to go to prison. Even if you do it right, even if you go through the chain of command and the congressional oversight committees, you're probably, at the least, you're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your security clearance at the very least, but you'll probably end up going to prison as well. That's wrong, of course. So we should have protections written in stone for going to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence or to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And reporting evidence of waste, fraud, abuse, or illegality to cleared staff officers. That should be, and that's an easy one. That's a gimme.
There's basically no rules on retaliation right now, in a sense.
No, and in fact, it's even worse. Now that the technology, remember, I blew the whistle in 2007.
Yeah.
The technology has advanced so much that every CIA employee has a computer with software loaded on it, where the AI on the computer will say, hey, these searches that he's been doing, that makes me think he might want to be a whistleblower. And your computer will rat you out to the Office of Security.
I could totally imagine you're trying to find some case study, case law, or
exactly
cite something in code. They're like, why would you want to know that?
I'll tell you what happened to a friend of mine at the CIA. He had just started a job as the director of a group of analysts from a certain geographical area. So on his very first day, he searched for all the major newspapers in English for that geographical area. He said 2 hours later, two guys from security came to his office. They want to know
the media.
Yeah, why the heck are you looking at these newspapers? He goes, are you kidding me? I'm in charge of the analysis for this part of the world. I think I need to know what they're saying in the press.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's also a reward program at the CIA now for people who rat out their colleagues who might be thinking about becoming whistleblowers.
That is hilarious. That's very
communist
in a sense.
Yeah, it is. It's very East German Stasi.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get too futuristic on you, but Minority Report vibes. You getting those?
Sure. Yes.
That's what it sounds like.
Stranger things have happened. Yes.
Damn. Yeah, I haven't even gotten to your views on like precognition or psi abilities or any of that. Do you have any thoughts on that? Whether it's
the CIA experimented on that stuff in the 50s and 60s and up until 1974. And besides wasting millions of dollars of the taxpayers' money, they just couldn't really quite figure out how to get to the bottom of it. In 75, with the advent of the Church Committee in the Senate and the Pike Committee in the House, they pretty much dropped it, pretty much. But then, and this is after my time, again, with the development of this unbelievably sophisticated technology that we have now, I understand that they're taking a second look at things.
Damn.
Yeah. I have no idea if they've, found a way to work any of it, but.
Yeah, just the fact that at one point parapsychology was a degree that you could earn is pretty crazy.
Yeah, right. Insane. Yeah, funny.
Finally, as someone who has seen the darker side of power and politics, how do you maintain hope? What keeps you motivated to continue advocating for justice, knowing these challenges and oppositions you might face?
That's a good question. For a while, I felt hopeless, and then what turned me was actually going to prison, and I realized what an enormous community of like-minded people there are out there. I said I was in prison for 23 months, and I received more than 7,000 letters when I was in prison, letters of support. I answered every single one of them because I thought, you know what? If these people, total strangers, are taking time out of their day to write me a letter to say thank you for what you did, the least I can do is write them a letter thanking them for thinking of me. And it opened my eyes to a community of people who care just as deeply as I do about human rights and civil liberties, about government overreach, and about how Americans have just kind of conceded their liberty without so much as an argument. They say that the ideological spectrum is this line that goes from left to right. And I don't think that's true. I think it's a circle. And at one point, the left and the right meet. And I'm kind of close to that meeting point.
You mean like personally or in terms of your advocacy?
Both, actually. I was on a podcast in Florida a couple of weeks ago, Danny Jones and his Concrete podcast. And we were talking about this. And I said, you have to understand how weird it is for somebody like me who's considered himself to be a leftist all of his life to find myself in support of somebody like Eamon Bundy, who's a right-wing extremist out west, taking up arms against the whatever it is, the National Park Service or
Wow.
the Bureau of Mines.
You just made me think it's like someone's doing something. That it's come to that though, right? And I think that's a broader view of how everybody feels about politics when it's not so much what we support of the candidates' viewpoints. It's like we're so tired of some other way of living, or
Yes,
just the opposite.
yes. I've long believed that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are simply two sides of the same coin.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
Jumping into the short yes or no, either or question section here. So you can answer it as short as you want, or if something stands out, go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that ethical integrity should always come before national security?
Yes. I would rather risk another 9/11 than to take the low road.
Damn.
I would.
Damn. Is loyalty to one's country more important than loyalty to one's personal values?
Absolutely not.
Given the chance, would you choose to blow the whistle again knowing the consequences?
I'd do it again today. The only thing I would do differently, if anybody's watching this and they're thinking of blowing the whistle, listen, please, if there's one piece of advice that you absolutely have to take, don't say a word unless your attorney is sitting in the chair next to you. Hire an attorney before you blow the whistle. Before.
Piece of advice. Do you think the CIA will ever fully embrace transparency?
No. Funny thing, though, when Gina Haspel was named CIA director by Donald Trump, she was doing her confirmation hearings up on the Senate in front of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And she was asked about me and my revelations. And much to my shock, she said that the torture program was a mistake and should never have been implemented. And she was one of the founders of the torture program. And she destroyed the evidence of the torture sessions. But she said no, that it was a mistake.
Dang.
Yeah.
Interesting. So still feeling the guilt there, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that the current global power structure is sustainable in the long term?
No, I don't. And I believe that it's not because of the American overuse of sanctions. Sanctions are going to be our demise. We have sanctions on everybody. I read recently we have sanctions on 68 different countries. It's like, seriously? And then we're shocked when the Saudis pay for Chinese goods in yuan, and they accept yuan as payment for oil instead of dollars. We're shocked.
Why just sanction space next,
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Let
me add something if I could. I apologize for going too long. We've got a law in this country saying that any country that violates sanctions on Iran must be sanctioned as well. So when Barack Obama negotiated the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, that opened trade relations between the U.S. and Iran, as well as the UK, France, Germany, Switzerland, Japan, everybody else, and Iran. Donald Trump gets elected, and he unilaterally pulls out of the JCPOA. Okay? So we don't trade with Iran. We have this law. If you trade with Iran, you're going to be sanctioned. And the Brits, the French, the Germans, and the Japanese are like, whoa, wait a minute. You told us to trade with Iran. You told us to sign this JCPOA, so we did. And now we actually have good trade relations with Iran. And now you're saying you're going to sanction us? You know what? Go ahead and sanction us. And we didn't. So they're trading with Iran. And now we're all pissed off.
So is it just a big old intimidation tactic that's getting old?
Yes. And then I'll give you another example. We have crippling economic sanctions on Venezuela. Okay, to the point where Venezuela can't sell its oil and the economy is collapsing. So what happens? Nobody wants to live in Venezuela, so they come here. And then we're like, oh my God, all these Venezuelans cross the border. Oh my God, it's illegal immigration. Yeah, we did the illegal immigration. We collapsed their economy, and then we can't believe that people don't want to live there anymore. It's just wrong.
Super good point. They're like, well, where is the money? Let's go there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow, dude. Good insight. What would you say the future of intelligence work lies in more, human intelligence than technology?
That's the $64,000 question. I mean, they were debating that when I first got hired. The job of the CIA is to recruit spies to steal secrets and then to analyze those secrets to allow policymakers to make the best informed policy. Simple. But it's like there's this insatiable desire to develop new technology. Well, you know what? DARPA and NSA are already doing that. And they're doing it with more expertise. So really, the CIA should be focused on human source intelligence. And it's not. What happened was after 9/11, the CIA became a paramilitary organization. So instead of recruiting spies to steal secrets, they're out there just killing people and kidnapping them and rendering them and, overthrowing governments and meddling. We get nothing out of it in the end.
Bustamante would say that's administratively challenging.
Oh my God. Yeah, he would. Yes.
So everything you're saying is allegedly. I just need you to know. Do you think that torture can ever be justified under any circumstances?
No, I don't. I mean, besides the fact that it doesn't work, no, ethically it can't.
Got you. And I don't even want to get into the deeper implication on that. Is it possible to maintain one's humanity while working in high-stakes intelligence operations?
Yes, but you have to work at that constantly. It's not an accident that the CIA has the highest divorce rate of any organization anywhere in government. Okay, it's close to 80%.
That's wild.
And I'll give you an example. My first wife was
How do you know they're not just promiscuous? I'm just saying.
Well, they are. I mean, we used to have this joke. We used to have this joke at the CIA that when you go to a meeting, don't touch the table because you don't know who was having sex on it last night. Yeah, it's not good. But my first wife was a ballet teacher. And, she obviously was uncleared. So I'd get home from work and she'd say, how was your day? I'd say, good. What'd you do? Nothing. Well, who'd you see? Who'd you talk to? Nobody. And then that's it. I mean, that's the extent of the conversation.
Just assuming you're tapped all the time, huh?
Yeah, and I can't tell her because I'm going to get polygraphed and they're going to say, hey, did you tell your wife classified information? And then, they're going to escort you out of the building if you say yes. So when I switched from analysis to operations, I remember my son, he was 3 at the time, and he said, Daddy, why do you have 6 phones? And I said, well, there are a lot of people who need to call me.
You're like,
right?
I'm trying to keep your mother with the mystery. She doesn't know anything about my day.
Yeah, but I got 6 phones in my den, which is locked all the time. And then one of those phones would go off at 11, which triggers a meeting at 2 a.m. So I have to do 3-hour surveillance detection route and then do the meeting and then 2 hours back just in time to take a shower and shave and get back to the office.
Interesting. So is each phone like based on operation or what you're doing?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were all burners, all of them. So I get home and she'd say, what was her name? And I'd say, come on, cut me a break. I had a meeting. In the middle of the night, you had a meeting. How convenient you come home just in time to take a shower. I'm like, I swear to God, I'm not cheating on you. And then we got divorced. And then my second wife was in the CIA. And I am legally prohibited from saying anything about her But as I said at the start of the podcast, don't trust anyone.
So do you feel like to the extent where they could be put in your life?
To the extent where they are put in your life.
Super interesting.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Do you believe that the U.S. government's actions are often more self-serving than altruistic?
Oh, the U.S. government's actions are never altruistic. No country's actions are altruistic. You know, I remember going into Kuwait City with the Marines on Liberation Day, 1991, and it was an incredibly exciting time, exciting operation. We pushed out the Iraqi troops. We reopened the American embassy, and I remember a Kuwaiti saying, "Well, you didn't do this just because of the goodness of your heart. You did this because of oil." And I said, "So? So what? I mean, if Iraq had gravel instead of oil, yeah, you're right. We wouldn't have liberated you. So? You want us to leave?"
Super good point. Super good point. It's like we didn't come here for nothing. Like, yeah, we
No,
came to help, but also,
exactly.
damn, yeah, it's always what's in it for me before they do anything.
Always.
Is it more important to protect the nation's secrets or to ensure public accountability?
Oh, without public accountability, I don't think we can have democracy. I really don't. I mean, that's why we have oversight committees. If you can imagine, the CIA was created in 1947. We didn't have congressional oversight until 1975. So the CIA was just running, amok from 1947 to 1975, killing foreign leaders,
Shadow
overthrowing,
organization.
yeah, overthrowing governments, spying on American citizens, doing anything they wanted. So you have to have accountability. Otherwise, you can't function as a proper democracy.
Let's move on to the funner stuff here. Philosophical influences. Do you have a favorite philosopher whose teachings have influenced you or your worldview, especially regarding ethics and justice?
Wow, I've read them all. Um, you know, at the in the closing minutes of my TV show, it's called The Whistleblowers. I like to quote a different philosopher, and I quote different people every episode. We've done about 140 episodes so far. I would probably say that the two that I've quoted the most often were Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King.
Damn.
They aren't really philosophers. Philosophers, I would say maybe, not even maybe, probably Thomas Merton. Yeah, the Catholic thinker.
Gonna do some research on him now.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar.
he's
Interesting.
quite good. Quite good.
Are there any particular philosophical doctrines that resonate with you, considering your experiences in intelligence and as a whistleblower?
I've I've become something of an absolutist on this issue. And you know, people will warn you that absolutism is probably not the healthiest kind of doctrine. But I always counter that by saying that at the CIA, the culture is such that we're all taught that everything in life is a shade of gray, right? And I came to realize that that's just simply not true. Some things are black and white; they're right or wrong. And so I think the prevailing wisdom is incorrect and does a disservice to the country to try to instill the idea of the gray area in CIA employees. I think it's just wrong.
That's kind of a good segue to the next one because I was going to ask how your outlook evolved after the experiences with the CIA and whistleblowing. Like, what prompted the changes in your philosophical outlook?
You know, I remember my wife telling me, she said, "You're at the CIA for 15 years, and they've known you for 22, 23 years. And it turned out they didn't know you at all. Not at all. I mean, I guess I didn't even really know myself at the time to think that when they would double down, I would double down too. In retrospect, if they had come to me and said, after I went on ABC News and said, damn it, Kiriakou, shut your mouth. You're not supposed to be talking about that stuff. Just shut your mouth. I might have said, okay, sorry, my bad, sorry. And then maybe I would have worked quietly with a couple of members of Congress to, change the legislation or whatever. But they came down on me like a ton of bricks. 3 espionage charges. Like, what did they think I was going to do? Just roll over? I was just going to roll over and give up.
Your whole life.
I had to fight. And then I started getting people on my side, like John McCain or Senator Chuck Grassley or Ron Paul. And
by the way, opened up my eyes to politics as a teenager.
He's a great guy. He's a great human being.
Just the first person who I've ever saw speak truth to power.
Wow.
As a teen, I was like, whoa. I was like looking around like, why not this guy? And adults were telling me radical. It would never happen.
Because he actually wants us to follow the Constitution. That's so radical. Oh,
it's
my
interesting
God.
Looking back, right?
Yeah. What's wrong with people?
Let's go on to extraterrestrial life and unidentified phenomena here. What are your thoughts on the existence of ET, and do you believe we've been visited by beings from other planets or dimensions?
When I first joined the CIA, the first question that all my friends and family members had was what I had learned about extraterrestrials. And the answer...
How annoying. It's like, hey, you're a hacker, get in my Facebook. It's one of those.
Right. And I learned nothing at the CIA. Nothing at all. It's a DOD thing. With that said, when I was 17 years old, my parents owned a restaurant in the neighboring town. We lived in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. The restaurant was in Sharon, Pennsylvania.
Was it Greek? Was it?
No, it was like a family restaurant. It was called the Phoenix Family Restaurant. And my dad and I were working midnight shift. So we were going to start working Friday at 11 o'clock. So this is Amish territory. And as you probably know, the Amish don't have electricity. So when you drive from one town to the other, it is just black outside. You can't see anything. So we're driving north on State Route 60. It's about 10:30 at night. Dark as all get out. And there's this flash of brilliant, like blinding white light. And he and I both looked up at it. And then there was a second flash and then a third. And then this orange trapezoid lit up. And it was just hanging there. It was just hovering. So my dad pulls the car over. And we get out of the car and we're standing there on the side of the road and we're just looking at this thing hovering. So it was clearly metallic. It had round lights, orange lights in the four corners, the angles, because it was like this. And a guy pulled up behind us and got out of his car and he goes, "What is that?" And my dad goes, "I don't know." And then it just went at this fantastic speed. And it just disappeared.
Like you wouldn't have seen it if you blinked.
Exactly. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before, and I've never seen anything similar since. We got back in the car, not saying a word. Finally, we're halfway to the restaurant, and I said to my dad, "So should we call somebody? Should we call the cops?" And he says, "And tell them what? We saw a UFO and it flew away?"
We have missing time.
Right. I'll never forget it as long as I live. I have no
Damn.
idea what it was.
Damn.
No idea.
With these increasing public interest in UFOs, do you think governments know more about these occurrences than they disclose?
I do. And I'll tell you why. When I was at the CIA, my cousin was in the Navy. And his best friend in the Navy was an F-16 pilot. We were all at Christmas dinner one night. And he said to me, "Hey," the pilot, he goes, "So what can you tell me about UFOs?" And I go, "Me?" I go, "What can you tell me about UFOs? You're the one flying around up there. I don't know anything about UFOs." He said, "I'll tell you, I saw two things that I just can't explain while he was flying." He said, "One time I saw something come out of the water and just go straight up at, better than the speed of sound, out of the water." And he said another time he saw something that looked like a saucer go down, scoop up water, and then take off. And he said, you have to make reports. Whenever you see an anomaly like this, you have to write it up. And he said the brass just sat on it. Nobody asked him for a follow-up. Nobody came back and said, "Hey, can you give us a little bit more detail?" Nothing. They just pretended it never happened.
I'm just
Yeah.
trying to imagine this desk of reports of these insane,
Seriously.
sci-fi movies all over.
Seriously.
um, are unexplained phenomena more likely extraterrestrial or interdimensional? What leads you to this belief?
Honest to God, I have no idea. I couldn't even speculate. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's the big question too, I guess. how would you how would the confirmation of intelligent extraterrestrial life impact global politics and societal beliefs,
Well, that was always the big fear
right?
that if,
Economy.
right, and if the government were to confirm the existence of extraterrestrial life, that people would go nuts and they would take to the streets and it would be chaos and anarchy. And then they declassified all those documents from the Pentagon and people were like, meh.
It's a good point, though. It's not like they make it press in the newspaper or front page news or anything either.
Right.
So, yeah. During your tenure, did you encounter information that made you question your understanding of the universe? I know you just gave some good examples, but
Not from classified information, no. No. It was
interesting.
all very straightforward. There were certainly some things that surprised me. I probably can't get into it, but yeah, it kind of changed my worldview as to who our friends were and who our friends were not.
Ah, that's a good point of putting it. Makes you think. I got you.
Yeah.
A few more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual practices, personal beliefs. Do you practice meditation, prayer, or divination to find guidance and maintain well-being?
The easy answer is no. I was raised Greek Orthodox. I'm still Greek Orthodox. I regret to say that I'm not a regular churchgoer. That's not because of the CIA. It's for personal, reasons, post CIA personal reasons. But no, I have a lot of friends who do meditation all the time and say that I would get some great benefit out of it, and I've never gotten around to trying it. It just seems like silly to me. But they swear that it's beneficial, so I don't know. Maybe one of these days.
You're like, I don't turn off this mind. Uh, has your exposure to different cultures led you to explore or adopt any spiritual or philosophical traditions?
It's a good question. Um, no, it's led me to more greatly respect other beliefs and traditions. Ever since I was a 15-year-old, I've had this passion about the Middle East. I'm fascinated by the history and the culture and the music and the architecture and it just everything. I just love the Middle East. The CIA taught me to speak Arabic. I spent a good chunk of my adult life in the Middle East. Loved every
Which
second of it.
which, by the way, just for the listeners' reference, you have really good podcasts going into much more detail on those stories and, yeah, like way more action oriented than I really wanted to focus on your background and upbringing here. But just in case anyone's wondering, there's a lot more insightful interviews out there on what you've done and contributed. Yeah. In times of stress, do you turn to spiritual practices for clarity? I know you said you're not really into all that Greek Orthodox, but has any of it helped you navigate complex situations?
The Orthodox Church has a large number of saints, and whether there is a God or not, I'll leave to bigger minds than my own. But I will say that I do take comfort in reading about the lives of the saints, because they were all so much more patient than I am, and so much more forgiving than I am, better people than I am. So I do enjoy that.
Do you find commonalities in all those universal truths and
Absolutely.
religious books in general?
Somebody sent me a book when I was in prison called A History of God. And I didn't read it at first. I let it sit for several weeks. Then I finally picked it up. And once I picked it up, I could not put it down. The God that we worship now bears zero resemblance to the God that we worshipped 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. Zero resemblance. It's like, we all laugh about the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus that so many people believe in, that we all know didn't exist. But our concept of God has changed so dramatically. There we are. It's changed so dramatically over the years, over the centuries, that you can't recognize God from the start to the finish. It's changed that much.
Point. God's evolving too.
Mm-hmm.
No one thinks about that. That is a crazy thought. No one says that. Talked about books right now. Any books you would like to reference for listeners that really impacted you, influenced?
Yeah, there were two. One by John Whitehead called A Government of Wolves. Very on point book about government overreach. But there's one that's even more important, written by a Harvard law professor by the name of Harvey Silverglate. It's called 3 Felonies a Day. And in this book, it's a very important book. He argues that we are so over-criminalized, so over-regulated, that the average American on the average day going about his or her normal business commits 3 felonies every single day. With the point being, if you somehow or for some reason run afoul of the government and they want to get you, they're going to get you. And there's nothing you can do to protect yourself. It's a dramatic book.
It's a super good point, too. Just good clarity and heads up. Provide value. Don't fight.
Yeah.
In summary.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to say don't fight, because I understand your whole career has been,
It's
made
been
around fighting. Yeah. Last words here on what it means to you to be more than rich, and then we'll get into promotional stuff you want to promote.
Yeah, listen, I will never know what it's like to be rich. One of the things that all whistleblowers have in common is that we're ruined financially, ruined. And an Israeli psychologist who wrote a book about whistleblowers told me once that if there's one thing that all whistleblowers have in common, it's that they never make a financial comeback. Never.
Okay.
Yeah. So listen, if you can't live without your annual golf vacations to Hilton Head or your trips to Hawaii or, your Mercedes E-Class or whatever, then this is not the life for you. But with that said, I can sleep at night and my children respect me. And I feel like I've left a legacy for my as yet unborn grandchildren to be proud of me when I'm gone and they want to know what kind of person I was.
Damn. It's been an honor to meet you today.
Pleasure's mine. Thanks
Anything
for
you want to
inviting me.
promote? Promote anything? Last words? Misfits website?
Yeah, sure. Everything I do, I put on Substack. It's at John Kiriakou. I've got a new book coming out in 2 months. I decided to do something completely, totally different. I've written 7 books already, all about intelligence and the CIA. Excuse me. This one is called Remains of the Day: The Ultimate Guide to Washington, D.C.'s Historic Cemeteries. So something different.
That is pretty cool. Is that a metaphor or is it a
No,
literal?
it's actually a field guide to all of
Wow.
Washington D.C.'s cemeteries.
Yo, that should
Yeah,
get you out of financial ruin. Let's go.
I hope so. And the Smithsonian Institution thinks it's going to be a great addition to the gift shop. So
I
let's
think
hope.
so. Dude, kudos to still being creative and staying positive. So
Well, I'll tell
pretty
you one of the weird things that happened because of this. That I called my publisher and I said, "Listen, I know you guys don't normally publish books like this, but I did it for myself, and it was fun and interesting. I tell these wonderful stories about people nobody's ever heard of, but they had these incredible lives, and th're all buried in Washington." And he's like, "Yeah, we don't really do books like that, but okay, just send it to me. I'll take a look at it." So he calls me like 3 weeks later, and he says, "Dude," he says, "this is the best book you've ever written." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "The editorial board loved it so much, they want to commission 3 more. They want the mafia graves of New York City, which I'm about 40% done with. They want the historic cemeteries of Chicago and the country western graves of Nashville."
damn.
So I've got those on contract now.
That's so cool. And all just to shine light on others, you know?
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, these books are not about the most famous people in these cemeteries. It's about the most interesting people in these cemeteries.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Cool
Yo,
stuff.
that is a great way to end the show. I'm asking you what it means to be more than rich, and you're like, it's about, the actual life you live,
That's it.
not the money
That
you
is
made.
it.
Nice. All right, John. Nice to meet you. We'll be in
Nice to
touch.
meet you. Thanks for having me.